It is sort of shocking to see how good the effects are when they're done.
What's amazing about this team that does the visual effects on Bones is that they make it pretty flawless. You really wouldn't even know that it was an effect.
Oh God, they're all so amazing. They do such a good job.
There was some pretty cool stuff this year, I have to say. I think the visual effects are getting quite good.
We use the visual effects shots primarily because they're a storytelling device.
Doing a show set in, astronaut land. And, they don't use those things that whirl around and make your face go like this anymore, which we thought would be amusing. But they do use the vomit comet.
Did you?
Did we what?
Vomit in the comet.
No, I didn't vomit, okay? I'm sure they were trying.
For a while, we thought maybe we can find a real one, but it'd be really hard not to damage a camera in there. So we decided to use a combination of CGI and cable effects.
When you first go in the harness, it's exciting.
The wire thing is kind of difficult because you're strapped in and you're in a harness, and that can pinch in some really crazy places.
What we would have done in the old days is have a false roof, and we would move the pick points for the cables and cable people and have them move around and stop and recable everything, and it would have taken probably 2 days to do what we did in a half a day.
It's harder than I thought it would be, but yet more fun than I thought it would be too.
There was a lot of practice that went into that, because Emily was doing the somersaults and everything to make it look natural. She loved it. I think we had to cut her down.
There's a lot of different technical aspects that you have to keep in mind. Including keeping your legs in so it doesn't hit the wires because it messes you up. There's a lot of things to think about. At the same time, it's very fun, so it wasn't hard to act like I was having fun. I would like very much to do that again.
In pre-production, we basically created a storyboard. We also knew that when you get to a set, to a location, and you watch the performance unfold, you can modify your coverage.
Kind of presented a problem when, you're not sure exactly which kind of background you're really going to need.
It was decided that it would be smarter, a better investment of our money into giving Derek the opportunity to create a 3D vomit comet. This way, if there was a last-minute change and we wanted to cut to David or we wanted to cut to Emily and we didn't have the appropriate background plate, we could then just go to a 3D recreation.
So the challenging part was to really make it look photoreal. The first shot, you see the actual set, and then the next shot, you have the 3D background, so it had to be seamless. Derek and I went to the set and we took measurements to create a proper scale. And we took a lot of pictures for reference, for textures. And once we had all the measurements and all the texture reference, I went into our 3D software, Maya, and modeled the vomit comet. So how this is done is, out of really primitive objects, we model this whole environment. So you have a cube here and you add geometry, you have all these little things are modeled and then textures are applied to it. After we're done with modeling, texturing, lighting, we try to match camera to our foreground element, the actor being on green screen. We can zoom in, we can rotate, and we have a lot of options to match it later on. So the final, I give my passes and layers off to the 2D artist who is then in the compositing package, bringing it all together and bringing it all to life with this magic.
By the end, you just don't see it. It's really seamless. It's very rare when you can actually notice where the visual effects are being put in.
She's missing every bone in her body?
Her skeleton was removed.
Oh, all right. Leaving the third circle of hell.
We have great bodies, horrible-looking bodies, but we've been discovering this year that you can make them look even worse with added effects.
They've pushed the envelope in terms of what they dig up. We never would have shown anything like that in my day. That's, it's people have to walk away. It's so realistic.
And that is what one of our hallmarks is, just revolting human remains.
Maybe those are bodies. I don't know.
You know, when there are flies around a body, it's just a real body.
The Man in the Mansion, I think there were flies. That it's actually kind of tough as an actor to sort of act like ants are there when they're not, or flies are there when they're not. Seeing that after they'd got their hands on it, I was amazed at how real and great everything looked.
Ants were amazing. In fact, my favorite shot was the shot of the publicist, and it looks totally photorealistic, and yet it wasn't, because we certainly can't train ants to perform.
I know the maggots that we have don't really listen to direction very well. We had to pretend like we were trying not to step on them and trying not to get stung or bitten. And then they added all these ants, and it looked really cool. I love the shot where the ants were in the foreground and we were in the background. That was really cool. I didn't know what that was going to look like when I did it.
The ant sequence is actually kind of nuts. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to deal with it, and ended up deciding on doing a particle system where every particle shows an ant when it's rendered. And in the end, they then said they wanted more ants, more ants, more ants. But with the particle system, I was able to do hundreds of thousands of ants without any big problems.
That was so cool. That was great. And there was a Egyptian bed scene, which was really cool. The room that we shot in was not anything like what it looked like, so it's awesome.
In Priest in the Churchyard, you see a situation where effects take a very capable hand.
We went out to Disney Ranch and put in a half a dozen caskets coming up through the dirt, and then basically built the rest of it around it.
We created that in 3D space, and we added mud mounds, dirt mounds, stones, skeletons lying around. We added 2 buildings, trees. It was quite challenging.
It was amazing what they did to make it look like many bodies had been washed out in a sinkhole, not just the few that we had there. It was really amazing. You won't notice, though, if we did it right.
And in episode 10, there was the scary ghost in the videotape, which was really freaky and eerie and cool. Scary stuff.
My leg getting sliced open was one of the effect shots that they used. My leg kind of splicing open was pretty gruesome and graphic, and I think pretty dead on.
Well, I was blown up twice. There was a time I was doing an experiment with Hodgins. That was a fun scene to shoot, because we actually had to throw ourselves back.
He and I were having such a good time, like, playing at that, you know? I mean, we felt like kids, just like getting to have dirt on our face and be thrown onto the floor. And on the day, it was just a little flash of light. They just had a light bulb that kind of would just flash to signify that there was some flame and stuff.
But to watch it and the glass cracks and there's this big explosion and you see us fly back with like the fire, it looked great.
He and I were watching it together and we're both like, whoa! So it was good. We were happy that as big as we were acting our reaction, that they were able to match it and make it look even more genuine and real.
Okay, the dimensions of the vat, 6 feet wide by 8 feet tall, make it impossible for Matthew Kentz to have fractured his brother's pelvis. The undulator, of course, is definitely a huge way of showing what happens to these bodies.
It's very beautiful to look at. The actors come in and stare at a piece of paper hanging from a string. And by the time we're finished, it looks, I'm amazed that the eye lines and everything always work out.
We sort of have an idea before we shoot it of what it's going to be, but it's always much better than whatever I have in my mind.
It has a lot of different challenges because you have to kind of focus your eyes to a midpoint, but there's nothing to focus on. So you have to focus on something that's not there and then change focus to the person and then back without looking like you are cross-eyed, which is a hard thing to do for me.
I feel like a little cross-eyed by the end of it, but it's fun. I got the undulator down now. We've been doing it for a little while.
The undulator really came from 2 things. Hart was really interested in the idea of this artist who recreates the faces. We saw that they do these very unique models and drawings, and that they were 9 times out of 10 able to recreate a face on a skull that was actually very accurate. So we looked at that, and just at that time I saw an article about a museum that had a 3-dimensional rendering of Abraham Lincoln speaking. And it was fabulous.
The technology exists. Ours is, you know, as in anything in TV, it's faster and better looking. When I was researching the series, I think there were 8 of them in the United States, and they are massively expensive, and they're used, the one I particularly saw was one that was used to foretell weather patterns. It looked fabulous, and we thought, oh, we can use that for our three-dimensional recreations.
The Spaceman episode, that was a very complicated angulator because it had to show the body being ripped apart, basically all of the bones shattering into hundreds and hundreds of pieces.
We were asked to take a skeleton and shatter every single bone in the body at least once, if not up to 4 times. So I was given a reference from production about where they wanted all the fractures to be, where the cuts needed to be from the propeller. I went about breaking up the skeleton and then animating it coming together, blowing apart, and that was the first step. After breaking all the bones, I then have to bring in the footage that they shot from the set and track it, which means, figuring out where these points are in space and making sure that the angulator lines up with it and moves exactly the same way that the camera moved on set. Now that I've got it tracked, we can move it around and it actually explodes inside the angulator.
So that was a lot of work. But they do a beautiful job with that because all of the, it's very difficult to get the bones to look like bone in that.
The other thing that we were very concerned about was the particulates. Now, the particulates are those like golden raindrops that fall from the top of the angulator to the bottom of the angulator.
If you're a hardcore Bones fan, they'll probably notice in the first season the particles gets thinner and also the color changes from whiter particles to yellower. Some people think it's just one layer, but there's several layers gets on top of each other to create the final look of the angulator.
It's just a great visual, and it shows you the lengths at which scientists have to go to create something, and that's why effects on the show are so important.
Jagged edges to the breaks, small fragments, lack of circular or radiating fractures, or adherent spurs.
If we've done our job right, you never knew that we've done anything, and so that's always the objective of any time we do a shot. We want it to look as photorealistic as possible.
Sometimes when you look at a CGI shot, it seems to stick out because it seems slightly electronic. And these guys go out of their way to give the objects that they create in 3D space a sense of realism.
I'm consistently amazed at how the scripts make their way to the screen. I think our crew is very good.
The people who do that aspect of the Bones show are masters. Masters.